Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode, as I know it's a topic that resonates with so many of you. And it's an encore, which means I recorded it years ago, and it's still relevant because how many of us have felt emotional abandonment? We talk about the roots of it being in childhood, and that's really important. And we want to learn how to work through it and feel better about ourselves. We don't want to feel in fear that someone's going to abandon us or reject us. We want to feel secure and confident with who we are. If this speaks to you, then this episode is for you. And if you want the healing guide that goes along with any episode I do, it's for free. You can grab it at kristendboyce.com/free resources. We will link it in the show notes. You can grab it for free and you can get our weekly newsletter in your inbox, which I only want to provide valuable content. So hopefully it helps you on your journey in this life. So a couple of takeaways that I want to make sure I'm emphasizing for this episode is we're working with learning how to validate your own emotions, building consistent relationships with yourself for starters, and picking healthy people, really working on the parts of you that try to protect you from rejection, judgment, criticism, and abandonment. It's trying to protect you from feeling shame. And so those parts also block connection. So we want to make sure we're nurturing and offering those parts compassion as they come up because they're so afraid. You might have a big part that is afraid of abandonment, or you have felt abandoned or have been abandoned by a parent or a caregiver. And we want to hold special place for empathy and compassion for those parts and those experiences. So I hope this episode is extremely helpful in your healing journey. And I would love to hear what you thought. Feel free to tag me on social at Kristen D. Boyce. Share it with a friend. Start talking about abandonment and emotionally feeling afraid of rejection. And let's start having deeper conversations with healthy people that are also on a journey of growth and expansion. In today's episode, we are going to be covering abandonment. And it is a pervasive topic, issue that I work with clients on the regular. So almost everybody that comes in has some sort of emotional, physical abandonment. They may not be aware of it explicitly, which means that might not be something consciously that they're aware of. As we unpack their family history, traumas, life experiences, we start to discover the sense of abandonment emotionally or physically. And I thought we'd start with some definitions because some people are like, well, I don't feel abandoned. I don't even know what you're saying. I don't know what that means. So let's start with some definitions. I think that gets us all on the same page. Let's talk about emotional abandonment. This is one I see most often. And this is from Wikipedia, which we can take give or take. This just gives us a baseline to begin this conversation. States emotional abandonment is a subjective emotional state in which people they feel under-desired, left behind, insecure, or discarded. And I think the key pieces of this definition are feel undesired, left behind, insecure, or discarded. Those are often and frequently what I hear from clients. They feel like no one cares about them, no one sees them, no one understands how they feel. They feel helpless, lonely, powerless. It goes on to say people experiencing emotional abandonment may feel at a loss, cut off from a crucial source of sustenance. That word is always gets me. that has been withdrawn either suddenly or through a process of erosion. And so what that means is that can be a parent leaving. That can be a physical abandonment. That can be all of a sudden there was a divorce and now at a young age, and now the child is functioning from more of an adult role versus being a kid. So they start caretaking the parent. Perhaps it's mom, maybe it's dad, but they start caretaking the parent emotionally, and their needs, their emotions aren't getting tended to because they've switched roles. They're now caretaking the parent. So that's another way to put that, as a form of, it's kind of a sudden withdrawal, which could be a divorce, a parental death even, or a parent leaving. And then, or suddenly the roles start changing where maybe there was a sudden death in the family and mom or dad now has to work full time to support the family. And now the child is left alone at home, fending for themselves. And so there can be a feeling of abandonment. What I often find with clients is that it's very hard to trust people. It's very hard to even trust the therapist because they feel a sense of, if I'm vulnerable with you, are you going to leave me? Or they may have had this conditioned response that they're not even connected to how they feel because they've been the caretaker. And so that feels very extremely vulnerable then to connect to your own thoughts, feelings, and emotions because they're so used to caretaking another person. And it's really important to start deconstructing why you feel abandoned. And we really have to float back. And I often ask questions, float back to our childhood, which people are often in therapy say, I don't want to go back to my past. The past is over now. And what I have to say about that is, yeah, nobody wants to rehash the past. We're not vilifying anybody. We're not blaming anybody. We have to go back to create understanding and insight and consciousness of why you show up presently the way you do, whether it's a relationship with yourself or a relationship with other people. So what I often say is I'll ask people, how old do you feel right now? And they look at me like, what in the world are you talking about? And it's a question I ask myself often. When I have a strong or intense emotional reaction to something, I ask myself, how old do I feel? So for instance, my parents got divorced when I was 8. And so often that will be the age that I go back to as my 8-year-old little girl self. And I will ask myself, how old do I feel? And then if I feel 8, I know at that point I might have some unprocessed emotions that need to be tended to. And so abandonment often is something that we take with us in all of our relationships. And if we did not get our emotional needs met, which means if a parent did not know about the neuroscience of emotion and the importance of emotion, oftentimes our emotions were either we're told to shake it off, there was a consequence or a punishment for crying or having any dysregulated emotion, or the parent themselves couldn't handle it. They felt so anxious that they either would yell and scream or get dysregulated themselves. So we learn to kind of shut that down. We learn to kind of stuff it down. We learn to turn it off oftentimes. Sometimes we learn to turn it into rage or anger. And so what happens is if we don't feel seen, acknowledged, cared for, like our feelings matter, that often brings up that inner child sense of nobody cares about me. I'm tired of taking care of everybody else. No one really cares about me. So we have this fear that if I get too close to somebody, they're going to leave. They're going to discover they don't really love me. If I show all my vulnerable, that's not going to be good enough. So the shame is there and they're going to say, I'm out of here. I really don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore. And so that feeling of pervasive sense of disconnection, the sense of fear that someone's going to leave, that's why it's really oftentimes a primitive emotion. It's a primitive feeling because it goes back to childhood. So oftentimes clients will come in and go, I had a really good childhood. My parents were together. We did things as family. And I think it's good. My childhood was good. Often when I hear that, it's not whether it's good or bad, because we have a little bit of everything in our childhoods. It's not whether your childhood was good or bad. That gets us into that black or white thinking. Often it's a case of our parents didn't know generationally the significance of sharing feelings, and so they did the best they could. And that's a hard one for people to accept as well. And we'll table that. And what we know is that when I say they had a good childhood, I probably can guess that they had some emotional neglect, because the way they're showing up in the therapy room is it's a very difficult for them to connect to those emotions. They can tell me all the thoughts and the beliefs they have. They can tell me cognitively what they think about something. So they're like, I feel like I had a good childhood. Okay, there was no feeling in there. That's a thought versus a feeling. And they haven't yet got the education that when they cried or when they had anger or when they had sadness, that their parents didn't really know what to do with that. And so what that looks like is, if their parent did have that education, they would say, it's okay to have your feelings. How are you feeling? So that might be a question they might ask. And they would acknowledge the feeling by saying, that makes sense. It's okay to have your feelings. It's okay to let it out. Well, a lot of parents are scared by that. Scared by the sense of feelings, scared by the sense of emotion. It feels overpowering and too much because they still have unresolved feelings and don't know how to cope with those. So what happens with abandonment is we hold back. There's a hold back, there's a hiding sometimes of what's really going on the inside, because we're so afraid that if I say how I feel, that they're going to leave. If I say I really don't like that or don't want that in a relationship, that they're going to leave. And my number one, so if we go into now, we're going to go into, how do I deal with abandonment? How do we start healing abandonment? The good news is we absolutely can heal from abandonment. The first step is, again, my number one step is awareness and recognition. Really can't, it's very difficult to change anything if we don't have an awareness. So we have to start being real about how we feel on the inside. And if we go try that on and say, yeah, I kind of did feel abandoned. I didn't feel like my feelings were tended to. I didn't feel like I really mattered. I didn't feel like my opinion was taken in consideration. I really felt left behind. I felt really that nobody cared how I would feel. So if mom or dad left, or a primary caregiver, where you're left with, I guess it was me. I guess I don't matter. I guess I'm not important. If we have role reversal with a child now taking on a more responsible role, let's say at 10, when they really need to be a 10-year-old, but they're functioning like an adult, making meals, and not that kids can't make meals, but they are now functioning like a primary household member. They're making the meals, they're helping pay bills, they're acknowledging parental feelings and not their own. So when we say stop crying to a child, when we say stop your crying, we're basically saying you're alone in your pain. So let me say that one more time. When we say stop crying to a child, we're basically saying the child's message is you're alone in your pain. So the child then says, I'm all alone in this pain. That's abandonment. That's the message. That's the end result feeling that an adult will have is, I'm alone in my pain. And when we feel alone in our pain, we feel helpless, we feel powerless, we feel shame, we feel fear. And so the first step is awareness. We have to start becoming aware. If this rings true, there's probably, now we're starting to kind of deconstruct, when did this start? So I want to float back to the first memory of when you felt alone in your pain. That's a great place to start, because I can remember feeling alone in my pain in my closet, writing in my diary. It was a very basic diary, but at 3rd grade, that was how I started to cope with my feelings, was in my closet. You might have had a safe space you went. You might not have had a safe space you went. And that was where I started to deal with what was going on the inside. And oftentimes we don't have that ability to write in a journal. We don't know that that's an option. This just happened to be something I was given as a gift. And that was where I started to kind of release some of this pain. And so awareness is the first step. The second step is starting to identify those core emotions, which is the episode, 2 episodes before this one is the core emotions episode. I don't have that exact episode number. However, that one's really important when we're looking at abandonment to start identifying what you feel. And oftentimes it's sadness, which really is loneliness, it's sadness, it's helplessness. It's anger. Sometimes it's anger that didn't get processed in real time. And all of that is okay to have. It's okay to have your feelings about the past. It's important to know it's okay that you had feelings towards your parents. What oftentimes is we don't feel like it's okay to have negative, what we label as negative emotions. I don't see any emotions as negative, but oftentimes we do. And so what happens is we don't want to have disconnection from our parents. And so what happens is those messages get internalized to ourselves. So if we're angry at a parent, oftentimes we end up being angry at ourselves. Instead of it being directed, it's misdirected onto us. So we become the shamer to ourselves. We become, I'm not enough, I'm bad, I'm defective, there's something wrong with me, versus the ownership on our parents. Not to blame them. It's not to take on issues that were not ours. We often take on a lot as children, issues that are not ours because we don't know the difference. It's our normal. And so abandonment really is rooted in childhood. It really, and sometimes we have later sense of abandonment. And I always encourage people to go back and just sense, were there other emotional wounds you had, other feelings that didn't get tended to? Whether it was you were upset about something at school, you were upset about a relationship or friendship that didn't get processed, a breakup, a divorce, a loss of a parent that never got processed, and we just went along to just create some normalcy. And so there is this sense of abandonment. And oftentimes, I know this will sound very far-fetched. We know that if there was an infant that needed to be in the NICU for survival, that also can turn into abandonment depending on how long that infant was, abandonment feelings, depending on how long that infant was in the NICU, because there is a sense of detachment from the primary caregiver. Can that be healed? Absolutely. That's an important question I ask because we don't have, obviously, explicit memory from that time. It is another sense of disconnection, and we call that attachment issue. And that's going to be another episode on attachment because we have various attachment styles, and oftentimes those are rooted in abandonment, or that will be another episode. So the first thing is awareness. The second thing is feelings, acknowledging those feelings, really getting connected to those feelings, because no one else will heal your abandonment. No one else will heal your abandonment. Oftentimes, we're looking to see I'm going to find the perfect partner that's going to do it. And what happens is they pull the curtain back and they're like, okay, well, that person isn't helping me feel important and I matter and I'm significant and they're not hearing me. Yeah, because they have their own childhood issues. Another person now, I'm not going to say that a relationship isn't healing. That's not what I'm saying. It's not black and white. They are very healing. We are neurobiologically wired for connection. But if my expectation is that this other person's going to heal me, you're going to have another sense of abandonment. Because the work I do in therapy is to help, and that's why I'm putting this out there in the podcast, is to help people caretake themselves, acknowledge their own emotions. It's basically reparenting to themselves, nurture yourself through it. So I think I've shared a lot about my experiences doing this. So when I do identify that 8-year-old online and she's upset or I'm upset, how I tend to that is saying, "Oh, honey, I see you're so upset and you're afraid. You're afraid that no one likes you." I'm making this up, but that this example on the fly, that no one likes you and that you'll have no friends and that no one's going to love you or you're unlovable. And what we know is that's just the shame talking. Shame says you're not enough and you are enough. Take a deep breath. We're going to get through this together. We've got this. I'm walking her as if I'm looking her in the eyes. I'm looking at my 8-year-old self, and sometimes it takes getting a picture of your younger self, whatever age you identify when I say how old you are. I'll have clients bring in a picture, and I know this sounds hokey pokey. All I can tell you is from doing my own work, it is transformative. My adult self, is looking my little girl in the eye, telling her, I love you. I might not even say a word to her. I might just hold her. I might look her in the eye and I might hug her tightly. I might rock her. I might tell her what she needs to hear, that it's okay for her to have her emotions. It's okay to cry. It's okay to let it out, that she is enough. She does matter. And I might tell her the truth that other people have stuff going on, and that doesn't mean you're less than. We're going to get through this. Because when we say, I can handle this, when I tell her we can handle this, we've got this, that is where the nervous system starts to take a breath and feel more regulated. I'm doing that for her because guess what? My husband doesn't know how to do that for her. My friends don't know how to do that for her. They might be able to acknowledge my feelings, but they don't know what I need. I can do that for her. This is what I teach people. This is what my whole practice of therapists teaches people, because we all do this work and we don't teach something we don't know that works. We're doing the work. And you embracing that little boy, that little girl, you embrace, and a lot of people have a lot of disgust with that little boy or little girl, or they have a lot of disconnection with their own little boy or little girl. We work on, look, this little baby came in pure. This little baby came in pure. They cried when they needed something. They whined when they needed something. They were trying to communicate their needs. They were trying to get their needs met. When we have unmet needs, whether it's physical touch, so a lot of people have a lot of need for physical touch, and we're neurobiologically wired for a lot of physical touch. So abandonment can come from not having enough physical touch, whether that's hugs, cuddles, hand-holding, scratching the back, rocking. We are meant for that. And so people have a lot of physical touch needs. And I often say, go get a massage. It's important to have some body work done. And hug yourself. I know that sounds really cheesy right now, but you can hug yourself and hug other people if they're willing to. If you say, hey, do you need a hug or do you want a hug? Hug your kids, not to meet your own inner child needs. That's not what I'm saying at all. I just discourage that at all costs. They need the hug because hugs are help healthy development. They help secure. It helps the child feel secure instead of insecure. So a lot of times people that have abandonment issues have a lot of physical neglect, touch. They didn't get a lot of physical touch. Secondly, they didn't get a lot of words of affirmation. So we're looking at the 5 love languages from Gary Chapman, that book. We can summarize these. They didn't get a lot of words of affirmation. And so abandonment can feel like they didn't get any encouragement. They didn't get any consideration for how they felt. They didn't get any acknowledgement for just being who they are. And so there's a thirst for having some acknowledgement. So we think our worth and value, we chase that we really want others to see our worth instead of us seeing our own worth and value, that you have inherent worth and value already. God kind of gave us inherent worth and value just as being a human being. Then if we had to take a lot of responsibility, acts of service, so doing kind things, often is another way we might feel abandoned. So we might feel like we always had to be the responsible one. We had to take over, whether that's in the doing household chores or helping siblings or, always having everything together. So acts of service can be very powerful for people when they didn't feel like they had mom or dad really caretaking them through things, making their meals, maybe helping with the laundry, taking care of some basics. Gifts is another one that we might feel abandoned with if we didn't get any gifts. So maybe Christmases, we didn't get anything, or birthdays were kind of ignored, or we didn't feel thought about. We didn't feel thought of. Sometimes it's not about a physical gift. It's we want someone to say, hey, I'm thinking about you. How good does that feel when someone sends a text or gives you a card that they're thinking about you? It's like, oh, that's so nice. And if we didn't get that, it even feels magnified. So that's another one. And quality time. We know that abandonment, if we did not feel like we got quality time with our parents or a primary caregiver, and that looks like we're not just watching TV, we're not doing, busy doing something. We're actually sitting down and we're connecting. We're checking in. We're saying, how are you feeling? Tell me about what's going on for you. And we have it's calm and it's safe. And children are wired for that. They need that. And if we had a lot of siblings, a lot of time, there wasn't a lot of quality one-on-one time. And not that siblings aren't fantastic. And we know children have so many needs, especially if there was a divorce young and a parent left or a parent died, the quality time tends to go down because they're doing the best they can to survive the parent. And so the children's feelings kind of get lost at an early age. And so quality time is one that often people will feel that nobody cares about them. No one reaches out to them. No one wants to connect with them. And when we do the work, I encourage people to not put the responsibility on someone else because they're going to be sorely disappointed because people have their own inner child pains. They have their own sense of abandonment. They are doing the best they can to survive. If you want connection, reach out to the person. And when there's abandonment issues, that's very scary because what if they don't reach out? What if they don't respond? What if they reject them? And what I try to work on with them is knowing that you are lovable and you are enough and you are important regardless of how the person responds. And that's the goal of therapy. That's the goal where we want to go. Or not even if you don't have to be in therapy. That's the goal of the work, is to get to a secure place within yourself to know that you are enough, that you matter. You can handle those abandonment feelings or that sense of abandonment, and we can heal that. Now, if we've had a loss of a parent and that was a trauma, I highly recommend EMDR, which I talked about last episode, because that can go back and reprocess those thoughts, feelings, and emotions that got stuck and didn't get tended to. So I highly recommend, if there was a trauma involved, EMDR or therapy are wonderful avenues to get unstuck and heal that. Abandonment feels like a lifelong journey for many people because the little girl or little boy inside says, ooh, but what if they leave me? I can't deal with that. I can't handle that. I cannot stand that pain and that grief. And what I work with people on is we absolutely will be able to handle that because you're handling your feelings. You're nurturing yourself through it. And again, if you need to go back and binge listen to some episodes, I talk a lot about nurturing because nurturing is a key component to healing abandonment, rejection, loneliness, helplessness. You can do it for yourself. And the icing on the cake is then you freely give it out to other people. It flows from your soul. It flows from your soul to do it for yourself. Now, I'm not going to say it's not work because I have to work at it every single solitary day. And what I know is it's the most powerful work you'll do and the most sustainable. So we don't want to do Band-Aid work. We want to do sustainable work. So we have to have awareness, connect to those core emotions, Identify how old you feel. And it's my favorite question. It's one of my favorite questions that brings a lot of interesting responses. I get it because it's uncomfortable at times to try to identify that. And then we're working on nurturing yourself through it, hugging that little boy or girl, connecting with her, knowing she or he has worth or value. And at the end of the day, really knowing that you have worth and value comes from this inherent, one, we have faith. That's part of your journey. That's helpful. It doesn't have to be, and I know a lot of people find the healing in that. That's part of what helped me find healing, is not feeling alone, that there's a higher power, that God is really working in your life and the Holy Spirit. And what I know to be true is healing comes from every day, your willingness to face the pain. Your willingness to face the pain. When we say, I can't tolerate it, I can't stand it, we push the pain down more, and it creates abandonment, that the abandonment doesn't get healed. When you're willing to face the pain, I know it can be transformed because I do it and I see it every day. It's the gift I get. And I hope this episode helps you know that there is hope and some steps to take to work on healing the abandonment within. And if you have any questions, I highly recommend getting on KristenDBoyce.com, whether on Instagram, you can DM me, or on Facebook. Because I know this brings up a lot of questions, I can't do therapy over those avenues. I do want to address questions in future episodes, or let's say this brought up something for you. Let me know what other episodes you want to hear, what topics you want to hear so I can cover them. What I know is this can stir up stuff. This can stir up deeper issues. This can stir up deeper feelings. And I know that can be triggering and that can be hard. And keep going. Reach out to a therapist. Get plugged in and don't give up, because this is the pain. Dealing with the pain is worth it. If you don't deal with the abandonment, it will follow you in every single relationship you have, whether it's work, partner relationship, kids, it will follow you. So I encourage you, you got this. You can do this. Don't give up. It's never too late. What we feel like is we're going to open Pandora's box and we're going to get stuck there. And what I know is if you don't open up the feelings, you will stay stuck in your life. You will not make movement, because if you do the same conditioned responses, you're going to end up in the same end result. So don't give up. Keep going. Journal, write it out, go talk to somebody, continue to do the inner child work, which I will continue to have major future episodes on, and it'll continue to be a focus. And I hope you got something powerful out of this episode. I encourage you to share it with other people. Start having conversations about abandonment. Start having conversations in your marital dynamic and with friendships and even coworkers. Share it, talk about it, start the conversation, start opening up, start facing it. It will make a difference. Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week, and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, KristenD, Boyce, BOICE.com. Thanks, and have a great day.